Families always came first. That's why you went to work every day and pushed hard and worked long hours and do everything you had to do to provide for your family and be able to go out and do fun things beside. This accident has changed my life tremendously as far as just daily activities and everything, and the family suffered quite a bit actually, you know what I mean? I think sometimes they suffered more than I did. Just an everyday part of life is just challenging I mean, you struggle because you know you should be providing for your family, doing the right things, and you can't. I mean, then you're struggling with your pain on a day-to-day basis, and then that's all varies too, because every day is different. I don't give myself high expectations, I guess, you know what I mean, where I did before, you know, and was gung-ho on everything that you did, you know, and so now I just kind of limit to myself on what I do and where I go and people that I do see, you know, because I kind of got this complex that people are always looking at me a different way of, you know, not such as a good person as you were before, you know, so it makes it tough.
Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines in SKYJACK Scissor Lifts Safety Alert to meet with Steve Gabrielson at the Stephen Gabrielson Limited Law Firm, who successfully represented Troy Borg when he was seriously injured at work by a SKYJACK model SJM 3219 scissors lift that failed, causing the work platform to tip and throwing him to the floor. He sustained injuries to his face, right shoulder, back, knees, and wrist. He underwent surgery and presently has a spinal cord stimulator implanted in his lumbar spine. SKYJACK is one of the largest manufacturers of aerial work platforms, including scissor lifts. Steve's law firm developed a very successful strategy to hold SKYJACK legally responsible for its own product's failure, and this strategy required extensive research and expert opinions by leading metallurgical and mechanical engineers to successfully settle this case. Today, for the first time on national TV, you will see SKYJACK service bulletins that failed to acknowledge the potential widespread failure of the lift mechanisms on its model SJM 3219 scissor lifts. In fact, 2 years before this accident, General Casualty alerted SKYJACK of the failure and resulting injuries, but SKYJACK did not take possession of the machine or assume financial responsibility for repairing it. But probably the most important alert of this entire Insider Exclusive Network TV special is that even though SKYJACK stopped production of these models in 1998, many of these same models, SKYJACK model SJM 3219 scissors lift, are still in use and have never been recalled or repaired. SKYJACK has a protective order in place preventing disclosure of its design and manufacturing protocol and its remediation efforts. So if you own or use SKYJACK SJM 3219 lifts, they need to be inspected to meet current safety requirements before anyone else might be injured. Throughout his career, Steve Gabrielson has earned a reputation as an unyielding advocate and lawyer who repeatedly represents individual men, women, and their families to search out the truth in the name of justice. And he repeatedly wins. Steve has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Sartell, in Minnesota, and across the nation. The Insider Exclusive News team discovered that no other attorney in the St. Cloud Brainerd area has tried as many cases for injury victims as Steve in the past 20 years. And Steve's experience has allowed him to earn both state and national certification as a civil trial specialist, an award granted to less than 1% of Minnesota attorneys. Steve's tried cases in more than 20 Minnesota counties and has won large settlements for clients throughout Minnesota and other states, and has built a substantial reputation nationwide by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down. Steve's spirit and dedication is often compared to President Teddy Roosevelt's, especially when it comes to being in the courtroom, in the arena he knows so well. For as Steve often says, it is not the critic who counts, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbled or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, daring greatly so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Steve's amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide his clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Sartell, Minnesota. It is my great pleasure to introduce Steve Gabrielson to the show. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you.
Tell our audience a little bit about your law firm. What kind of law do you practice?
I have a small shop. I'm a one-attorney law firm, but I have two offices. I have my primary office in Sartell, which is a suburb of St. Cloud, Minnesota, and I have a branch office up in Brainerd, Minnesota. Both offices are staffed, of course.
Now, when we were doing a little research on your background, we noticed you were a certified civil trial specialist.
That's right.
And very few lawyers are that. What significance is it? What does it mean, first of all, and why is it important?
Being certified as a civil trial specialist is a way to guarantee to prospective clients that the attorney has lots of experience and has met rigorous competency standards. About 1% or less of attorneys in Minnesota have earned both state and national certification, and I have both of them.
So it kind of guarantees that if someone were to choose you to represent them, you have a lot of experience behind you, plus your peers and the accreditation agencies think that you're one of the best. Is that right?
It's the only empirically based organization, or these are the organizations that can grant certification.
Of the many trials that you have successfully won, tried, and settled, one of them we are here today to talk about is the case of Troy Borg. Tell our audience who Troy is.
Troy was a drywaller in Brainerd, Minnesota. He was an independent contractor, young man working on a project where there was a renovation of a grocery store.
Okay.
And he was injured when he fell from a scissor lift that failed while he was elevated approximately 15 feet in the air.
And as you're talking, we're showing this particular scissor lift because there is a model that was defective. What is that model?
The model is the SKYJACK SJM 3219 scissor lift.
When the case originally came to you, what were the challenges that you were facing in this, and how did you overcome them?
Tremendous challenges. Troy was a self-employed drywaller. He had no workers' compensation insurance coverage for himself, and so he didn't have the assets to pay for his medical care, no insurance coverage to pay for his medical care, nor did he really know exactly what had happened to him. He could draw me a picture showing what he thought the machine looked like after he was thrown from the machine, but he didn't know what had happened to cause the machine to fail. So we had to try to put together what had happened over time. And fortunately, we were able to do that. We identified the machine. Turned out that police had come to investigate this fall. Troy wasn't aware of that.
Right.
But we got good police photographs that showed how the machine failed. And that got us started because we learned that this was a SKYJACK SJM 3219.
Right.
We learned that SKYJACK had actually published service bulletins regarding failures in the lift mechanisms of this particular type of machine. And then as we proceeded with the case, we were able to identify some protocols that had been followed by SKYJACK to follow up on machines that were produced during this run of 3219s.
Now, when you talk about service bulletins that they published, where did these service bulletins go? Were they distributed to owners or distributors of SKYJACK Scissors Lifts?
SKYJACK tried to do a good job in distributing the service bulletins because they wanted to have their machines fixed.
Yes.
But they didn't do a good enough job because the machine involved in Troy's injury had never had the repairs made to the lift mechanism called for by the service bulletins. Furthermore, SKYJACK had an opportunity to do so several years earlier because the same lift had been involved in a failure in Mississippi, where the lift mechanism failed. A person was thrown from the work platform, suffered injuries. SKYJACK received notice of it, but they did nothing to have the service bulletin repairs made. Instead, they attempted to transfer all financial risk for the repairs or for the value of the machine to the company that owned it at that time.
So what were some of your legal issues that you had to prove?
Well, we needed to demonstrate that the scissor lift was dangerously defective for strict liability against SKYJACK. But upon learning that the machine had been involved in a prior failure in Mississippi and tracking the machine from Mississippi after it had been involved in a failure involving injuries, knowing that the failure involved the lift mechanism, not making the service bulletin repairs, the insurance carrier that took the machine from its then owner transferred the machine via an internet broker to a company in Minnesota, which then resold the machine to the company that owned it at the time of Troy's injury. Somewhere along the way there, somebody made some weldments to that prior failure. Nobody's admitted who did it. The insurance company said, we didn't do it. The company that bought it from the insurance company said, we didn't do it. But the company that bought it and owned it at the time that Troy was hurt said the repairs had been made at the time they bought it. They just weren't the repairs called for by the SKYJACK service bulletin.
What was the eventual outcome of this case?
We had various motions for summary judgment brought by all of the defendants except SKYJACK. The district court in Crow Wing County ruled against each of the defendants who moved for summary judgment. The case was ready for trial. We were prepared to try the case. We'd already mediated the case. I wasn't interested in mediating the case again. But about a month or a little less than a month before trial, we received a global offer from all of the defendants that was sufficient for Troy to say, that's enough. I don't need to go further. But it's a confidential settlement.
Confidential settlement. In cases like this, and we see this time and time again, you know, where there's a confidential settlement, and one of the reasons we want to do this show is there are some SKYJACK scissors lifts model 32, SJM 3219 out there that may have not been repaired to this date, right?
Well, for sure.
Yeah, and people should be aware of that, right?
Absolutely.
Today we are fortunate to have Troy, your client, with us, so let's bring him on right now.
Great.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Troy Borg to the show. Welcome to the show, Troy.
Yes, glad to be here.
I know you traveled a great distance to be here, and we really appreciate you spending some time with us. What do you remember about the day of your accident?
Just basically going to work, and
You were how high up were you?
about 15, 16 feet, somewhere in
And then
there.
all of a sudden it just tilted over and collapsed?
Yeah, well, me and the other gentleman that was in the lift, actually we heard a click to when we actually had the scissor lift go up a little bit higher, and then asked what the heck was that. Well, then the next thing you knew, it just went to go a little bit more up or whatever, and the scissor lift actually collapsed.
And were you unconscious then, or what?
Not that I remember.
But you must have been in a lot of pain.
Yeah, pretty much. Face was exploded and from fracture here and stuff.
Yeah.
But
Tell our audience a little bit about what happened then. You were taken to the hospital. You suffered severe injuries. Didn't
yeah,
you?
we ended up having to wait for the ambulance and stuff like that to come and brought us to the hospital. Yeah.
When you first got this case, Steve, this was a case that required a lot of detective work to find out who was responsible, right?
That's right.
And the other side put up some barriers to help you find that out, didn't they?
That's the truth. We had a lot of challenges. One thing is, Troy did go to the hospital, but
Yeah.
he didn't have insurance coverage for his own medical expenses, so he was without medical care for a great period of time. In fact, that's what it was when you came to see me, if you recall that.
How did you end up finding Steve, by the way?
Actually, I was referred by my brother-in-law. Yep.
Yeah.
He had a case, and Steve handled it and did well, and so he referred me to Steve.
A lot of the cases that we handle, are cases where you have an individual that was injured, and usually they're up against a Goliath, a major corporation. Oftentimes the major corporations really don't take responsibility for their actions, and they try to hide behind an army of lawyers. What do you have to say to corporate America when they cause a problem? What should they do?
Probably spend more time in probably trying to, instead of hiding things, get it out there so people know and take care of it, I guess.
Yeah.
As far as, otherwise, a lot of people ain't aware of what's going on.
Right. That's one of the reasons we're doing this show, because the model SKYJACK scissors lift that you were on, I think the 3219,
SJM 3219.
there are still some defective models out there that people who own them are not aware that they're defective, and people could get injured today, suffer similar injuries like you. I want to thank you very much for being on our show. It means a lot to us, and I'm glad to see you're better today.
Yep, appreciate you having us here and having us on.
Okay, thank you. We are now going to bring on two experts that you used in the case. They are Lester Engel, right?
That's right.
Who's a metallurgical engineer, and John Berner, who's a mechanical engineer, who kind of cinched the case for you.
That's right.
So let's bring them on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Lester Engel and John Berner to the show. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Lester, tell our audience a little bit about what type of expert you are. You are a metallurgical engineer, correct?
Yes.
What do you do?
A metallurgical engineer. Basically, we provide a lot of litigation support for failure analysis for all types of products.
Anything involving metal?
Anything involving metal.
Okay.
And we also do other work for standard commercial
Right.
work.
And John, you are a mechanical engineer, correct?
That's correct.
And what is your expertise in as a mechanical engineer?
I work with mechanical, electrical equipment, essentially design
Yes.
and reviewing equipment per ANSI or ASME specifications.
Okay. In this case, as I said earlier, your testimony, your expertise kind of made the case, definitely made the case. Tell our audience what is wrong with the SJM 3219 model. How about you, John?
Well, I believe the equipment, as it was designed, did not meet the standard specification. And in addition, it was inherently questionable in terms of whether it could withstand the normal
The wear and the tear.
wear and tear.
The wear and the tear. What about, Lester, what about the weights put on it? What did you find wrong with this model?
I think there's a number of things. One of the items was the basic design of the weld joint for the hinges, because it failed where the hinge hooks onto a tube in the scissor jack. And basically that design was one that would not allow it to be properly welded.
Okay.
And
What
that-
should have been hooked onto rather than a tube?
Well, the concept was okay. It was the details of that design of how they put the hinge piece into the tube that they ended up having space inside that you couldn't weld into. And so then it ended up having welds that were didn't penetrate all the way in. They actually created cracks on the inside of the tube, and that was what initiated the fatigue failure.
Right. There are SKYJACK model 3219s out there right now that have never been corrected.
That's correct.
And therefore there are future potential accidents. What do you have to say to our audience, to owners, or retailers of this machine right now what they should do?
They need to get it in and make the design changes. There were some design fixes. Unfortunately, what SKYJACK proposed and how they went about it was inadequate.
Yeah.
But in any case, to get them fixed, personally, I don't go up in SKYJACK lifts.
And you would recommend the same thing?
I
right, John?
believe that a number of these failures aren't just possible, but they're almost a certainty.
Yeah. Do you know, I'm
Future
just kind of
failures.
curious, do you know how many of this model was manufactured by any chance?
No, I don't think I know the actual total number. that they
Thousands,
produced.
hundreds, I don't know. Anyway, I want to thank both of you for being on this show. We're sending a message out. This is national TV, and hopefully the people who own these lifts will get them in, get them fixed, get them repaired to prevent the accidents. Steve, when you take on a case, you have a lot of people contact you, they want you to represent them. What do you look for that really makes a good case?
Well, you have to have a good client. You have to have...
Good client means a believable client.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And you need to have facts that will demonstrate some liability, and then you need to have damages. So with those three things, the case is worth pursuing. Troy's case was a real challenge because he wasn't sure what had happened to him, and he was not financially able to afford to pay for the medical care that he needed. So we had very little medical care, very little knowledge regarding what had actually happened to him. And so it was a challenging case.
We've filmed a lot of these type of cases, not Troy's case, but many type of David and Goliath kind of cases. What I like about your firm is that you're not afraid of the courtroom.
Right.
And you are willing and able to bring a case right to the jury, because the jury of our peers is really one that decides what's fair and equitable, isn't it?
That's right. We were sure willing to do so in this case, and we almost got there before they stepped up.
Well, I want to thank you very much for sharing this story on the show.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.